The wind carved through the plains like a dull blade, dragging dust across the horizon until sky and earth wore the same tired color. Clayton Harlow rode home in silence, reins slack in his hand, the horse limping beneath him. The saddle creaked with each jolt, and the only sound was the wheeze of the animal's breath and the whistle of a world gone dry. The drought had taken his cattle, the bank had taken his pride, and loneliness had taken everything else. He smelled the fire before he saw the figure. A thin plume of smoke curled like a question mark over the fence post where he'd left no one that morning. As he dismounted, boots crunching on the brittle grass, he caught the shape of a woman crouched by a small cook fire, her dark skirt pressed around her knees like a tent. Beside her sat a little girl with tangled hair and bare feet, holding a limp rag doll against her chest. The woman's face turned toward him, but her eyes did not, wide and unmoving, gray as fog. "You're on private land," he said, though his voice carried no bite, just weariness. The woman lifted her chin, slow and steady, as if listening to the wind instead of his words. "We were left at the rail station. The man never came." Her voice was low and warm, like something wrapped in cloth and carried far. She spoke with a Mexican accent, gentle but certain. The child looked up, blinking against the sun. "We can go," she said, adjusting her shawl. "But the girl hasn't eaten since morning." Clayton looked at the child. She had the sort of stillness only hunger brings. Not whining, just waiting. Her eyes found his, and she smiled, small, hopeful, trusting. He rubbed his beard and exhaled. His farmhouse stood a dozen paces behind him, its paint stripped by years of sun, empty except for him and the echoes. "You can stay the night," he muttered. "It's a long walk back to nowhere." She didn't thank him. She only nodded. That told him enough. Inside, they sat in silence while he ladled stew into chip bowls. The woman never asked what was in it. The girl ate like she hadn't tasted warmth in days, her tiny hands gripping the spoon like a relic. Clayton watched her, this child with dust-colored hair and the round, serious eyes of someone who had already learned to listen more than she spoke. "I'm Esme," the woman said at last, folding her hands in her lap. "This is Luz. Her father died before she could remember him." Clayton said nothing. He wasn't a man who answered grief with grief. He simply nodded and offered bread. She reached forward slowly, fingers hovering above the table until they found the edge. She was blind, not by a wound. He could tell by the way she moved. She had lived in darkness for years and knew it like others knew light. After the girl fell asleep on a quilt he laid by the hearth, Esme remained seated, her face turned toward the fire. "I was meant to marry a man out here," she said. "A rancher with money. He wrote kind letters, but when I stepped off the train, he looked at me like I was cattle that had gone lame." Clayton leaned back in his chair. He didn't ask for details. Still, they came. He said I looked older than my letters, that I brought a burden. She tilted her head. He didn't know I was blind. I never said, but I think he would have hated me even if I had sight. Clayton stared into the flames. He remembered the woman he'd buried 3 winters ago, and how love had vanished with the first snow. He didn't ask Esme why she hadn't gone back to El Paso. He knew why. You don't go back when going back means shame. "You can stay another night," he said. "There's room." The next morning, the world was still brittle and gray. Clayton rode into town for flour, coffee, and silence, but Mrs. Leona Tibbins was already perched like a buzzard behind her counter. "Clayton Harlow, I hear there's company out on your ranch," she said, counting pennies into a tin. "A blind woman and her child? Folks say she came to marry Gideon McGraw, but he wouldn't take her." Clayton didn't reply. He set his coins on the wood and waited for her to hand over his goods. "You ought to be careful," she added, eyes sharp. "Mexicans are real good at looking pitiful. Just ask the preacher." Clayton took his sack and left. The door shut behind him like a judgment. That evening, Esme sat on the porch, her fingers curled around a cup of lukewarm water. Luz was humming to herself, barefoot in the dirt, drawing circles with a stick. The quilt Clayton had given them now hung neatly folded over the railing. "People talking already," he muttered, taking a seat beside Esme. "Say I'm going soft." "You are," she said and smiled. It startled him. "I mean, I'll let strangers in. I don't think you're soft." she replied. I think you're tired. And kind, which is rarer than strong. Her voice was honeyed, but plain-spoken. No flattery, no pleading, just fact. Clayton felt the tension in his shoulders ease, just a little. He watched Luz chase a grasshopper across the yard, the child's laughter breaking the spell of silence that had long haunted his land. Later that night, Luz began to cough. It started with a dry rasp and turned into sobs. Esme cradled her, rocking slowly, whispering words in Spanish. Clayton stood by, useless, until Esme said, "She needs something for the fever. Do you have?" He didn't let her finish. He retrieved a small bottle from the shelf, laudanum. He had rationed it for nights when the pain in his leg grew too much. But this night wasn't his. She hesitated, her hands trembling. I cannot repay you. It's just medicine, he said. You give it to her in drops. Her fingers brushed his as she took the bottle. His skin burned where hers touched. After Luz fell asleep, her fever cooled and her breath even. Esme didn't return to the hearth. She stayed by the child, her hand resting on the girl's belly like a prayer. Clayton stood by the doorway, arms folded. Outside, the stars hung low and hard above the plains. He looked at Esme's profile, soft cheekbone, furrowed brow, hair pulled back with a piece of twine. She looked like someone who had never known ease, but had learned how to carry grace anyway. He almost said something, almost asked what she'd do next, but she beat him to it. We'll leave tomorrow, she said, voice steady. You've done enough. Clayton looked toward the child, then back at the woman with the moonlit face and eyes that saw nothing but still felt everything. You can stay another night, he said again, quieter this time. It's just one more. But in his chest, something had already shifted, quiet and slow as the changing wind. And he knew they weren't leaving tomorrow. The wind carried the taste of dust and lilacs as Mercy Whitlock stood beside the porch rail, her sightless eyes turned toward the hills. Her pale fingers tightened around the wood, weathered smooth by years of loneliness. Clover chased a moth in the yard, her laughter threading through the silence like wind chimes in a churchyard. From the barn, Silas Ridge watched them, arms crossed, sweat soaking the collar of his shirt. The woman and her child had stayed far longer than the promised night, and yet neither he nor the cabin had buckled under it. He remembered how she'd first arrived, dust in her hair, a wariness in her voice, but each day had softened something in him. She moved through the world like someone carrying too many unspoken things. But she never begged. She never assumed. And that made him trust her more than most who came with handshakes and hollow grins. Today, she hummed a lullaby while shelling peas. It stopped when hoofbeats broke the stillness. A fine black carriage pulled up, wheels glinting. It didn't belong here, too polished, too sure of its place in the world. Silas stepped forward slowly, wiping his hands on his pants. The driver didn't meet his eyes. From the carriage stepped a man bloated with power, flesh pressing at the seams of his suit, eyes sharp and cruel beneath a straw hat. Name's Bramble, the man said, loud enough to shake the dust from the porch beams. I come for what's mine. Mercy's body went rigid. Her hands dropped the peas one by one without sound. Harvey, she whispered, as if the name itself were a wound. Behind him, a younger woman emerged, sharp-cheeked, eyes cold, lips painted like blood on snow. Clara. The air thickened. I ordered a bride last spring, Harvey said, eyes scanning the porch, then landing on Clover in the dirt. Got the wrong sister. Your Mercy ran off, so I took the pretty one. May do. Mercy trembled. You never owned me. I left because you. Harvey raised a hand. I don't care for stories. I care for bloodlines. That girl there? She's mine. We're close enough. Silas's voice came low, a drawl edged in iron. You're trespassing. Clara stepped forward. She had her chance. Turned it down. Ran like a coward. What was I supposed to do, starve? At least I knew how to survive. Mercy's hands balled into fists, her shoulders square against the storm that had finally found her. You knew what he did, and still you took my place. Clara smiled without warmth. There's worse things than a rich roof. Clover looked up at her mother, confused. Mama. Harvey took a step toward the girl. She's got my jaw, And I hear she's clever. Silas moved faster than thought. Between them in an instant, hands open, breath steady. This land is mine, and I don't see any judge behind you. Harvey's nostrils flared. You playing Sheriff Ridge? No, but I'll bury a man same as the law would if he tries to take a child that don't belong to him. The silence cracked. Harvey spat near Silas's boot and turned, barking at Clara. Get back in the carriage. We'll settle this in town. Clara lingered, eyes sweeping over Mercy with something like pity, but not enough to stay. I didn't ask for your life, sister. I just wore it better. Then they were gone, carriage shrinking into a blur behind dust and pride. Mercy crumpled to the step. Silas didn't touch her, just stood nearby like a wall against the wind. After a time, she spoke, voice hollow. She was always the favorite. She never wanted anything but a mirror and a man who wouldn't ask questions. I didn't even know I was carrying until months later. That's why I ran. Silas said nothing. His fists unclenched slowly. I never told anyone, she added, because who would believe a blind girl whose sister wore her face and took her place? Clover sat quietly beside her, laying a flower in Mercy's lap. I'm sorry I brought this on you, Mercy whispered. Silas finally sat beside her. You brought peace into a house that never knew it. That man brought trouble to a house that didn't ask. She turned toward him. You think peace can survive this kind of storm? Silas looked at the child, now tracing circles in the dirt with a stick. It's already surviving. Look at her. That night, Mercy didn't hum. The fire cracked in strange rhythms, like it was thinking hard. Silas lay on his cot, but didn't sleep. He heard her breathing, uneven, saw her hands clasped like a prayer with no words. In the morning, he was up before the sun. He cleared the space beside the cabin, driving posts into dry ground, measuring with twine and boot steps. Mercy came out holding a mug of coffee and leaned into the doorframe. You building something? She asked softly. Room, he said. For Clover. Mercy tilted her head. Or for me. He met her gaze. Even blind, she saw more than most. I guess I'm building something for staying. She smiled without showing teeth. Never thought I'd stay anywhere again. Silas didn't answer. Just kept digging, hands rough, heart steady. Later that afternoon, they drove into Willowbrook to fetch lumber. The town was colder than usual. No one greeted them. No one offered a hand. Mrs. Partridge watched from her porch like a vulture eyeing the slow dying. Inside the general store, the hush fell heavy. Mercy's head was high, though her hand stayed close to Silas's coat. She's the one, someone whispered. The blind one with the child. The one who refused Bramble. Another voice, sharp. No woman says no to a man like that and gets away with it. Ezra Pike, the blacksmith, appeared at Silas's elbow and offered him a thick board of pine. Wood's on the house, and if Bramble comes back, I've got iron to spare. Silas nodded once. That was all. As they rode home, Mercy spoke softly. I was afraid the world would always see me as what I escaped, not what I became. Silas didn't say much. He just reached for her hand and placed it over his, letting the silence speak for them both. But when they arrived back at the ranch, the gate hung open. Clover was missing.